Welcome to We Chat Divorce, hosted by Karen Chellew, Legal Liaison, and Catherine Shanahan, CDFA. Each episode, we sit down with divorce professionals and industry experts to provide insights and frank discussions about real people, real situations, and real divorce to help you achieve your best life post-divorce. This episode of We Chat Divorce is brought to you by My Divorce Solution, offering divorce financial planning so clients can secure the divorce settlement they deserve. Visit mydivorcesolution.com to request access. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to We Chat Divorce, where we break down the messy, emotional, and often confusing parts of divorce to help you make smart, informed decisions every step of the way. I'm Karen Chellew, Legal Liaison and co-founder of My Divorce Solution.
And I'm Catherine Shanahan, Divorce Financial Specialist, CDFA, and co-founder of My Divorce Solution. We're here to give you the clarity you need so you can take control of your divorce, especially when it comes to your money and your future.
Today on Divorce Explored, we take one divorce reality and break down what it could mean for your financial future. Imagine that you're going through a divorce and trying to decide what should happen to the marital home. This is such a common decision and actually an emotional trigger that so many people face. So you go to a realtor and the realtor looks at the market and says, this is a great time to sell. Or perhaps a realtor tells you, you should keep the house. It's a valuable asset and you may never be able to buy into this neighborhood again. That may be very useful real estate advice, but it's not a complete divorce analysis. The realtor may not know how much equity is actually available after the mortgage, selling expenses, repairs, liens, or taxes are considered. The realtor may not know whether keeping the house would require you to give up retirement assets, investment accounts, or cash you will need after the divorce. And the realtor may not know whether you can assume the existing mortgage, qualify for a refinance, or buy out your spouse, or maintain the home on your income. So before deciding whether to keep or sell the home, you need to see the whole picture. What will the marital balance sheet look like after the transaction? How much cash will each person have? What will the monthly budget look like for you? What assets will remain available for retirement? What happens if the home needs a roof, an HVAC system, or even a major repair? So without that broader analysis, the house can become a decision that drives the settlement rather than an asset being evaluated within the settlement.
Okay. So if your head is spinning right now because Karen just asked you a ton of questions about the house, I'm right there with you because I wanted to interject with all of those because it's interesting when you say, the realtor may not know how much equity is actually there, I think is something you said. Well, the client, the person right now, you do not know how much equity is in the home. It's interesting how many times I get on to discuss a division scenario and they see the net value of the property. And the client will say, well, wait, what? It's only worth that? No, that's not what it's worth in general terms. Here's what it's worth. Here's what you would sell it for. But you have to pay off this mortgage. You have to pay off the second mortgage if there's one. And then the net result of that is plus you'll have closing expenses. There's a lot of things that go into selling a home. So your net number is really what you have to consider. But in addition to that, how many times do I hear or do you hear, well, my spouse says I could just keep the home. Like he doesn't want the home. I could just keep it. And then I show that value, that net value is going into their column. And they said, no, he was going to give it to me. And that's not what they mean. It's very rare that a spouse says, okay, you could just keep the home, all the equity in it. Yes, they say you can keep the home, but they want their value of that asset from another asset.
That's so true. And how often, Catherine, do we get questions from clients when a realtor has really taken a strong position about selling the home, that, this would be a great decision for them. And then they want to get on the call with us to talk about their approach. And it really can become a source of friction in that decision making because it's really hard then for people to know where their truth lies. Not maybe not the truth, because truth comes in from all different areas, but what does that mean for them? And I think it can become very confusing and overwhelming.
Well, yeah, because it's a one-off negotiation, right? We're talking about
Mm-hmm.
just the home. And how does that affect, again, even to the point of what asset do you have to give away if you're keeping the home? But in this case, if a realtor's telling you to sell it, what's involved with selling it? What's the time frame to do that? And then where do you go? Because you don't know what other assets you're keeping. So you don't know what your support payment may be or may not be. So you don't know what you can even afford. So you can't just make that decision until you know what your overall agreement may look like.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and then sorry, but a
No,
lot
go
of people,
ahead.
their spouses are saying to them, we have to sell the house. We can't afford it. We can't afford it. Well, wait a minute. How will that affect my support payment before we do that? Right? How does selling the house affect everything in divorce? You need to know that before you agree to just go sell the home.
Exactly. Or keep it or refinance it or whatever it may be. Yeah. So,
Yesterday, I want to just bring up a client who got a support order, and she was she was happy about it. But I asked her a little bit about it, and she said, "Well, he's still paying the mortgage." I said, "Oh, in addition to your support payment." She said, "No, no, I get net of that." So she gets whatever the mortgage is deducted, and he pays the mortgage. Well, she wants to refinance, and she doesn't understand that nobody pointed out to her that the amount of money that's being deposited into her account every month is what's getting used for a mortgage company to see if you qualify. So she would have been better getting the full payment and making the mortgage payment herself so that she has the clock ticking towards closer to getting that, being able to refinance. But she said, why didn't my attorneys tell me that?
yeah, it's because attorneys answer questions, right, that you ask, and their job is not to give you financial advice. And so many people misunderstand that. And that is what we're talking about today. We're talking about what we call the term professional silos in divorce. And a lot of people don't realize this until they're well into the process and wonder why they're getting so many different um, perspectives or advices that don't coordinate, because the family law attorney is focused on the legal process, the applicable law, the court schedule, discovery, negotiation, and everything needed to complete the divorce. The accountant's focused on tax reporting, tax exposure. How do they help you reduce your taxes? Like we said, the realtor is focused on the property, the market, and the sale, all very important perspectives. The mortgage professional is focused on whether someone may qualify for financing. Estate planning attorney is focused on wills, trusts, beneficiary designations, transfer of wealth. And your business advisor will be focused on protecting the company or restructuring a transaction. So every professional does have an important role. The risk rises when advice from one silo, as we're going to talk about today, is treated as the final answer or a complete answer to a decision that affects every other part of your divorce.
Which is a problem because those professionals are only really answering the specific question that they were asked.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't look at your divorce as an overall agreement. They look at it, what did you ask them? And that's what they're going to answer.
Exactly. I see it as in my head, Catherine, I have like just a imagery of all these silos
Yes.
and our clients just going door to door with the information that they have and getting so confused. It's a repeated experience that we have with our clients.
And a lot of times I feel like that professional, even though they're asked something and they answer that, they all have opinions, right? They want
Mm-hmm.
to say, well, I had a case that this happened to. Okay, well, now the client's getting confused because they're thinking, well, that should apply to me as well, right? But it doesn't apply to them. It's just in conversation. So imagine going to all those silos, like you mentioned, and every professional kind of gives you a personal perspective in there as well, or shares another story in addition to just answering your question. So all of that's in your head, and you're getting so confused on what's relatable to you and what isn't. And then the worst part, I think, is that, what do they call it? That telephone, yeah, the scenario of the telephone where the story just changes throughout
Oh,
the
yeah,
call, right?
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
so what happens is you go to the next professional in the next silo and you tell them something you think you heard from the other professional.
Hmm.
And so imagine doing that 5 times with 5 different professionals. You come back with a story and you're like, what? Because I know when they share some of the information they get with us, that's what I say, like, what? What are you talking about? And
Yeah,
that's why we have legal liaison services, because it's so important to have somebody else in there listening, because we all hear things differently. But it really can mess up your negotiation because you get amped up and sometimes you are communicating with your soon to be ex. So you say something to them, it just becomes this big mess.
absolutely. And, financial planners can often play a role here too. But what I experience is the client asks a question from wherever their space is, and the professional can only respond to the question being asked, right? Even if it's way out of left field. I had a recent situation where the client went to the financial planner and she was talking about the business and so forth and so on. And the financial planner took a strong position with her and said, you need a forensic accountant right away. So we had to untangle all of that for her because the financial planner had no knowledge of the work that MDS was doing to develop the case if and when a business valuator or a forensic would be needed. But they came right out and, it frightened her that somehow she was missing something. So
Mm.
it can become very confusing and overwhelming for sure.
Well, it's frustrating as well because, I would like to ask that financial planner, what did she need the forensic accountant for? Did you tell her? Did you specifically tell her what the scope of that work would be? Or are you just making a blanket statement?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we all could use a forensic accountant. Gosh, I didn't realize how much Starbucks coffee costed. Can you please go
Yeah,
back and evaluate every time I get a Starbucks coffee, right?
right.
So if you're going to make a blanket statement like that as a professional, explain the scope that you think that is needed. Exactly. What's my
Mhm.
deliverable? So the client should be able to say back, "Oh, really? You think I need a forensic? What for? What report do you think I would get back? And how would that relate to my decisions in divorce?"
Yeah.
Right? Just
Yeah.
hold the
Yeah.
professionals accountable for what they're recommending. Ask what is the return on your investment for that request.
Exactly. And I think a lot of times a professional will say something like that to demonstrate that it's outside of their scope, but the client takes it as literal advice. And,
Yeah, that's true. Like,
right?
let me kick the can. This is not something I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to kick it to the next person. I just don't, I think attorneys do that actually. And I
Yeah.
loved kick the can. That was one of my favorite games growing up. We'd go out, it's getting dark. You got to kick the can and go pop. Did you play that? Did you play kick the
Yes.
can? Okay. So I think you're imagining the silos. I'm
Mhm.
imagining kick the can because that's what attorneys do, especially when they say it depends,
Mhm.
right? Or they just kick it to another professional, and they're usually it's the forensic. Everyone
Mhm.
loves to kick it to them because it's an easy out. They don't have to do the work, like you just said.
Yeah, exactly. So, Catherine, tax advice presents another example of where we see these silos. Your accountant will calculate that you could have tax savings if your marital status ended before the close of the tax year, and you would be able to file then under an unmarried filing status. So, again, that may be a very valid tax calculation, but the tax savings are only one part of the decision because in some jurisdictions, the divorce process allows marital status to be bifurcated, which means the marriage may legally end while financial issues, including property division, remain unresolved. So the assets do not automatically become divided simply because the parties are legally divorced. The availability and consequences of bifurcation vary by state. So, just for everyone's knowledge, this is just an illustration, not a rule. But the question cannot be limited to how much would we save in taxes? The real question is, what would we save in taxes? What could we give up or complicate elsewhere? And how does the complete outcome affect each person? So it's more about asking questions and drawing conclusions.
Well, it's also, listen, your accountant says that you'll have a tax savings if your um, uh, ended your divorce before the year end. Well, you tell me what party out there doesn't want to end the divorce before a year end, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not
Let's
even
get
about
right
the
on
tax
that.
save. It's not even about the tax savings. It's about, okay, yeah, who wants to stay in this long, drawn out process? Unless, of course, you don't want to get divorced. Um, so that's okay. That's common sense. Great. Like you said, what is the tax savings? But more importantly, can we negotiate that? Because if you're still negotiating, that's why you would need those answers, right? So,
Exactly.
the bifurcated cases, gosh, I think everybody wants that too because you want to just be divorced. But it doesn't mean you're still not in it. You're going to have additional legal fees because you have additional court meetings or you have no incentive to really have this conversation, right? You're divorced, you're over it, you don't want to go back and talk to that person typically. So now you have to go back and talk about the financial issues. I think the only cases, and we've had a few of them, I don't recall which states they were in, but I was always dumbfounded, Karen, right? I was like, what do you mean they're divorced? And now we have to talk to them about their finances. And it's typically people who want to get remarried right away.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
or they're in relationships and that person is pressuring them.
Yeah.
Or it's just been taking too long and they want to move on, be able to do things differently, knowing that they're divorced. But it's never been an easy process.
No, and it really complicates things to your point. And there are some states like Louisiana that forces the bifurcation if the parties haven't settled by a certain date. So there's all of these various situations that people
No,
come up
actually,
on
I
and
like that. But why? But if they're forcing it because it didn't last so long, it's lasting too long. Why are they not forcing them to resolve the financial issues?
they don't. It just goes on and on and on with less pressure to get it done.
That's
Right.
interesting.
It
Yeah.
is. It's
That is,
frustrating.
yeah, that is frustrating. But this is a silo that's important. The tax advice is very important
Mhm.
because, some assets have a loss carry forward. Who's getting that? Like these are the conversations you need to have in that silo. Um, what is if I agree to stay married to the end of like we will come up with that soon because some people do wait till January, right, to file jointly if there was a big
Mhm.
gain that the parties are splitting the cost, but how do you negotiate that away? Like how do you negotiate that? So there are really good questions for your tax advisor to answer, but
Yeah.
again, know the questions before
And to
you
be
move
aware
forward.
of. Yeah.
Mhm.
And some people may not even notice because there's so many moving parts in a divorce. And, essentially the client becomes a translator. And to your point, Catherine, we just had a situation recently where the parties are coming up on October, or they're going to be filing their tax return. And to your point, there was a large carryover, about, I don't know, more than $500,000, which was all going into the spouse's account or not account, but being forwarded to the next tax return, which would have been spouses. And so, we asked the question, well, this should actually be split or, something, this should be addressed because clearly next year, because they will be getting divorced very quickly now, um, they will be filing separately. So then how do you manage this carryover? And nobody caught it. So, they had to negotiate that.
So that wasn't really a carry forward. What that was is a prepayment to next year's taxes.
Oh, yes, you're
Yes.
right.
And
Yeah.
and you do
Carry
see that
over. Is
as a
it
matter
called a
of
carryover?
uh
I think that's how we were
carry
referring to
over.
it. May not
Well,
be the right
anyway, it's
term.
prepayment to next year's taxes.
Hmm. Yep.
But we see that even in smaller cases, it's part of
Yeah.
divorce planning. Oh, we don't
Yeah.
need that refund. Just put it towards next year's taxes. And usually, whoever instructs the accountant, that's where it's going.
Mhm.
So it is something to look for on your tax returns, or
Yeah.
or to ask your accountant.
Yeah. Exactly. So, if you find yourself becoming the translator, these are all things that you need to be aware of because the same issue multiplies the more professionals you have involved, especially when there's a family business, a trust, or a complex estate plan. A business attorney is protecting operations, evaluation professionals determining the value of the ownership interest, As we said, accountants are focused on taxes, estate planning attorneys presenting the wealth transfer plan. The family law attorney, of course, is asking whether the interest is marital, separate, community, or subject to a claim. All of these questions matter, but here's one of the least recognized burdens of divorce. The client becomes the translator. You become the translator between the professionals. So you meet with the accountant, you meet with the various professionals, recommendations are made, and then what do you do with that? All of this happens when you're under financial pressure, facing deadlines, processing unfamiliar terminology, and managing the emotional reality of divorce. This is not an effective coordination system.
Yeah, I talked about that earlier. It's a problem because we all hear things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're meeting with so many professionals, you can't keep it straight. Like, how do you keep it straight, right? So we like written communication, of course. Some professionals will not do that. But I think you should always follow up with whatever you're hearing, follow it up to confirm that you heard it the right way. Because you don't want to assume something. It can be a very costly mistake. Even professionals say something and you feed it back to them. You're like, well, wait a minute, I didn't really mean it in that regard, right? So
Exactly.
it's really good to confirm what the next steps are, what you heard in that conversation, and where it applies and where it doesn't apply in your case.
So the answer is not to use fewer qualified professionals. The answer is to coordinate the advice around a complete financial picture. At MDS, we always start with what you know and what you have. From there, you build out the marital estate using key and supporting documents. Before acting on a major recommendation, ask these questions. What information did this professional review? What assumptions are built into the recommendation? What other assets, debts, income sources, taxes, or settlement terms would be affected by my decision? Does the recommendation work within your post-divorce cash flow? And which additional professional needs to evaluate the decision before it becomes a part of the settlement? The goal is not for every professional to become an expert in every discipline. The goal is to make sure that your professionals are solving the same problem using the same financial facts, hence the MDS financial portrait. So the most important takeaway is this: good professional advice is not automatically complete divorce advice. Because in divorce, the best decision is rarely the decision that works in only one silo. It's the decision that works within the complete financial reality of your life. Thank you for joining us today on We Chat Divorce. If this episode gave you clarity or a new question to consider, please pass it along to someone who needs to hear it.
And if you found value in today's conversation, take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a comment wherever you're listening. Every share helps us reach more people searching for honest, financial, grounded answers. And actually, if it also sparked a lot of questions that you have, any follow-up questions, don't be afraid to send those over to us as well.
And learn more at mydivorcesolution.com.
Until next time, remember that financial clarity is power. Make your decisions with confidence, with verified information, and with the right people in your corner.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of We Chat Divorce. We hope this episode was informative and supportive on your divorce journey. If you're looking for more support for navigating divorce with confidence and clarity, head over to mydivorcesolution.com for more podcast episodes, divorce events, and resources for your divorce. We'll see you back here for our next episode.